Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar, Trace, Track and Authenticate, Transforming Brands and Digital Product Passports. It's good to have you here and thank you very much for signing up. So I'm Hayley Solomon, Group Brand and Marketing Director for ITL. I'm joined by colleagues Baz van der Pol, founder of Tappr, Jimmy Christopher, SVP Sustainability Innovation for ITL, and Warren Owen, Director of Business Development for BanQu. Through this webinar, we aim to give you a sense of how interconnected we are and also the resulting benefits to you. So first of all, I'll start off to say that today we're really looking forward to giving you some deep insights into tracing, tracking and authenticating your supply chain, resulting in authentic digital passports through which consumers will have access to via smart labels, which is the core foundation of ITL's business. With labels being pivoted into the spotlight as a communication and engagement piece between the physical and digital world, we're taking centre stage with a product and a solutions perspective, and hence why we've come together with our partners Tappr and BanQu to extend a collaborative and holistic offer to brands in the form of Trace, Track and Authenticate, Xplore. But before we go into that, let me first introduce you to ITL. From concept to delivery and beyond, we design and manufacture labels and packaging for brands and retailers. We are based in 21 locations globally. And quite simply, our mission is to create innovative, intelligent and sustainable ways to connect brands with consumers. As tier 2 suppliers in the value chain, we have a unique and transparent view of the apparel supply chain. And hence the core of our purpose is social and environmental sustainability, for which we continue to drive through a collaborative lens, and we activate this in a number of ways. One of the ways is through our ESG decision making that happens at grassroots level within our factories, and those conversations get taken all the way into our boardroom and vice versa, including all of our stakeholders. We also engineer products as standard through our solution intelligence, which results in less wastage, lower cost and lower impact on the environment for all of our clients. And if this is paired with our alternatives material series, you get greater sense of impact for your ESG targets, and most importantly, scalable. And last but not least, we also offer smart labeling solutions such as RFID to enable inventory accuracy and QR codes and NFC across our labeling portfolio, which is currently empowering our brands to foster deeper consumer connections. Critically, even more so, with the regulations and consumers wanting to know more at hand, our smart labelling portfolio is also part of our collaborative solution, Xplore, Trace, Track and Authenticate. Which takes me on to what you're going to receive really nice, good insights into today, our solution with Tappr and BanQu, and it's very much collaborative. It looks at the upstream, the midstream and also the downstream as well. So you'll get to understand how to trace your supply chain from the first mile, how to track their data to ensure that you make ethical and strategic decisions, and also how to authenticate your product story using DPP while forging deeper connections with your audience. So enough about that, now on to today's agenda. First of all, we'll open up with my colleague Jimmy Christopher, who will give us an overview of the opportunities of the regulations created. He'll also delve into the steps to develop a digital product passport holistically, as well as navigating regulation pressures and requirements. Then we'll introduce BanQu, our upstream traceability partner, with Warren providing you key insights into authentic traceability. Here we also get to discuss actually what we've been working on, which is actually tracing our own supply chain with BanQu. So it gives you some real nice authentic insights. And last but not least, you get to meet Baz, founder of Tappr, who will introduce a downstream activation for digital passports, including and beyond regulations for authentic engagement and also dynamic storytelling. To try and keep it interactive as possible, there's going to be some polls sort of going through the actual webinar, and also there are openings to questions. So please do use the chat function to add in any questions throughout this webinar, and we will select at the end with the team some to ask questions for, time permitting. However, most importantly, this webinar is for you, so please tease out the things you really want to know, and I hope at the very end you gain a great sense of some really good takeaways. To this end, I will pass you to my colleague, Jimmy Christopher, SVP Sustainability and Innovation for ITL.
Thank you, Hayley. Thanks very much.
Very welcome.
Great.
How are you?
Great introduction. Good. How are you? On opposite sides of the
All
world.
good, thank you. Yes, all outside the world. Very excited. Okay, I'm going to head backstage virtually now, and I'll see you later. Take care.
Lovely. Thanks, Haley. Okay. As Haley mentioned in the agenda, I'm going to be covering a few bits of insights into some of the opportunities that actually present themselves through digitizing your products and digital product passports, as well as some of the regulations. We'll have a short poll, and then we will be touching on what are the practical steps. How do we simplify this process? It's a big undertaking for many organizations around the world. So I think it's very important to understand that while there are regulations driving some of this, there are significant opportunities. For those, I like to split them into two areas. One around circular business opportunities on the downstream side, as well as upstream benefits on your supply chain. On the circular economy side and around digitizing your products, there are numerous things that QR codes on your garments can do. For example, helping to facilitate repair and maintenance programs for brands, as well as optimizing recycling of garments and end-of-life management. For example, QR codes inside your garments, be it on heat transfers or care labels, can tell waste managers what the fiber compositions are. Is it a poly-cotton blend? Is it 100% cotton? Those types of things are important if we're going to accelerate recycling of garments to actually be a commercial opportunity. It can also help to support take-back schemes and reverse logistic programs with brands, being able to scan QR codes when consumers are returning products, or to authenticate, for example, in the luxury goods market. That's quite an appealing prospect. As well as then from a marketing perspective for brands, being able to give sort of customized recommendations for your consumers when they're scanning a QR code in store, as well as some of the more innovative side around things like virtual try-on, augmented reality integration. Customers can, through AI and augmented reality, try on items virtually. This can help to reduce return rates, and as well as then building some consumer trust, engaging deeper with your consumer from a brand's perspective, showing your supply chain, having the confidence and the authenticity to disclose all of that and build strong relationships with your consumers. And then lastly, it helps with data-driven product development. The more you know about certain products, why they're being returned, where they need repair, can help to inform future product development decisions. Then on the upstream side, on your supply chain, the more data you gather about how your materials flow from all over the world into your final garment helps you to build a leaner supply chain. Getting insights into where your suppliers are, who they are, how they make things, what materials they use, what manufacturing processes are used. This can help you to rationalize your supply chain, rationalize your supplier base, thereby giving you a leaner, more efficient, shorter lead time, and a better supply chain for you, your consumers, and the business as a whole. Having insight into what's happening in your supply chain is essential for needing to mitigate the risk of financial penalties. The regulatory side is increased these days with various regulations needing compliance in your supply chain. You can improve your demand forecasting and inventory management, particularly when you start to leverage RFID with QR codes. This can help to also optimize transportation routes and logistics. This helps lead times, cost, and your Scope 3 carbon footprint. Ultimately, having these insights into your supply chain helps to build a more resilient supply chain that can deal with supply chain shocks, of which in the last 5 years we've seen a lot, from COVID to geopolitical tensions, as well as there is a definite risk of increased physical risk from climate change for manufacturing facilities around the world, which impacts all of our supply chains. So those are opportunities that present themselves. There are also another aspect of this, which is that quite a lot of this is going to be mandatory for various organizations, depending on where you are in the world. I'm going to touch on a few key ones. The first one is the UFLPA, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. That is currently in effect in the US and applies to cotton and other goods coming in from China. The aim of this regulation is to ensure that there's no forced labor or production coming from Xinjiang in China. It is enforced by the Customs and Border Protection. It is already starting to have a large effect on US-based brands. You are needing to provide proof of your supply chain, to prove where your cotton is coming from, how it was manufactured, proof of compliance and social audits that there was no forced labor involved in your supply chain. This is a large undertaking where there are 1 to 5 tiers potentially involved upstream before it gets onto the ship to come into the US. You need systems in order to be able to track and trace and hold all this data. The next one, ESPR, the Eco Design for Sustainable Products Regulation. The digital product passport sits underneath this. This is coming in through the EU and is one of the drivers of the term digital product passport as well. This will require brands putting garments onto the market in the EU to have certain information attached to a QR code. For example, you will need information like about the product's life cycle, including the materials used, manufacturing process, details of the supply chain, where it's made, what materials are in it, and as well as end-of-life disposal options for the consumer. Brands will need to be able to gather this data, integrate it into a digital version of the product, and then affix it to the garment through physical labeling. There are also various EPR schemes around the world, Extended Producer Responsibility Act. In South Africa, there's a packaging one that is already in effect that we are reporting to with our South African operations. California has just passed a Textile Recovery Act, which will mean that garments now come under EPR scope. What is needed for this, for brands and organizations affected, is that you need to know the types of packaging or types of materials, types of garments you're putting onto the market. What are they made of? Are they recyclable? Are there end-of-life recycling instructions? Again, large amount of data needed, and it needs to be communicated. Then there's the EUDR, the European Union Deforestation Regulation, which was supposed to come in next year, but it looks like it's been pushed back a year. This will require organizations putting paper products, wood-based products, and some others onto the market in the EU to be able to know where that wood came from. Where is the forest? What is the country of origin? Potentially up to polygon and geolocation data. If you're using things like FSC paper, you'll need chain of custody, FSC certifications along your supply chain, and potentially needing to do risk analysis on deforestation, depending on where you're sourcing from. Some other honorable mentions on the regulatory side is the AGEC law in France, which is in effect and already requiring some levels of traceability. Germany and Canada both have supply chain acts in force that require traceability for brands to go down their supply chain, tier 1, 2. They have varying levels of depth that are needed on the tiers, but it looks like they will continue to expand further down the supply chain. Then there's the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, again coming out of the EU, which will also require due diligence down your supply chain from certain organizations. And then relating to some of the stats up on screen there around green claims, there are various pieces of legislation around green claims in the UK, US, and EU, where you will need to substantiate claims you're putting onto the market. We want the benefit of being able to market about sustainability, but it needs to be authentic, it needs to be legitimate, and it needs to be science-backed. Without having information on your supply chain, knowing who is making what where, you won't be able to make those claims with confidence and to mitigate your risk of financial penalties. Lots of acronyms. I know the regulatory space is quite mind-boggling at the moment, but it's important that we stay abreast of it. That brings us to our first poll, which will be coming up on screen shortly. And it will be asking us, what are our biggest pain points for implementing traceability within your supply chains? We know it's a big undertaking, and to roll out projects of this scale require very much cross-functional work within organizations. You need IT, compliance, sustainability, legal, finance. There are a few things we've put up on here. I'm going to give it a second or two for the results to come up. I know we have faced some of these pain points in our own process of mapping our supply chain. We started with the gaining top level buy-in one. We overcame that one and then kind of got onto all of them. I would think that almost all of these for us have been a pain point at a certain point in time for us. Okay, I think we can close the poll. There we go. Supplier resistance or reluctance seems to be the most common at 35%, and then a tie with top level buy-in, limited technology infrastructure, and complexity of the supply chain. So supplier resistance or reluctance by far being the most popular. I would agree with that one. That was probably one of our biggest ones as well when starting to trace our supply chains. And I think that brings it to it brings home the fact that this needs to be a person and a relationship style approach with your supply chain. If you really want to get buy-in from your supply chain, they need to be educated and on board and shown the benefits that are mutual. Okay, thanks everyone for the poll. We're going to go back onto my last point around how do you develop a DPP practically. Okay, so this again is kind of split into two steps from my side. One is you need the supply chain data, and two, you need to build a DPP solution using that data. For the supply chain data side, upstream, you need a data collection process that needs to be structured. You need to identify what data is required. So what do the regulations say is required? What else is important for us as an organization to gather? Where can we get wins? Where can we make a positive impact in our supply chain? You need to engage with your suppliers to get this data using some sort of standard format across all of them. Very difficult if you're getting Excel sheets from numerous different people with different formats. You need a digital platform and an IT infrastructure to set this up, choosing digital systems, integrating unique digital identifiers from physical garments to your digital versions. And you need to implement data security and access controls. You don't want to share everything. You want to share what's required, what's important to you. And then you need to continuously be involved with your stakeholders. You need regular engagements with them. Sources of materials and supply chains change upstream. You need to know when that's changing. So you need to have strong relationships with your suppliers and all of your stakeholders in order for you to be compliant and report on it. Once you've got all this data, you then your physical label with a QR code onto the garment. For that, you need to link each QR code DPP. QR codes need to be generated, something we do, something various organizations do, Tappr and BanQu as well. ITL already holds care label information, which is part of your tier one. So we know where tier one vendors are. We know what garments are made of. So some element of mapping is almost held by us already. You then need to design durable labels with QR codes. It has to be readable. So you need clarity of print. It depends on what type of material you're putting it on. Are you wanting to put it on a care label or a heat transfer? Those all have different applications. You then want to ensure that it's an interactive experience for your consumers. You want to engage your consumers more if you want to leverage the downstream opportunities that do present themselves. And then you need to ensure that it's secure and scalable. This isn't something that you can roll out to an entire supply chain, every single product at once. It is very much the old cliche, eating an elephant one bite at a time. You start with products where you have decent visibility in your supply chain, build those relationships, use an iterative process to scale it across your products and your supply chain, but start small, work it out. Okay, that brings me to our next person on stage, Warren Owen, the Business Development Director for BanQu. He'll be joining me for what we've called a fireside chat. Maybe I've got a gas heater in my office instead, but that's close enough. Thanks, Warren.
Hi, Jimmy. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me. All right, I think we've got a few things to share here.
Absolutely. I think we do have a couple of questions today, and obviously to shed some light on the wonderful world of DPP. I'll shoot first with the first question, Jimmy, if that's okay. But I think obviously we've been through a journey as a partnership. What and why was BanQu the preferred supplier and partner for ITL when it comes to DPP?
So for me and us at ITL, I think it stemmed from our goal was to be able to provide traceability as well as wanting to do it on our own supply chain. Supply chains in this industry are complex. We felt that what BanQu was able to provide us was robust enough to deal with the type of data we want to collect and the methods in which we want to collect it. And I think one of the other, for me, the the real driver from this was one of the founding principles of BanQu that you guys have up on the website, which is dignity through identity. Our real goal here, and ultimately the goal of the regulations, is to improve these supply chains and make people's lives better for the good of all of us. That really was a driver. I heard a good quote from Ryan Holiday, who's an entrepreneur and worked for American Apparel, that said, expanding your definition of stakeholders creates a more sustainable and viable business. And that's really what we were trying to do: expand the definition of stakeholders within our supply chain. And BanQu was the right partner for us on that.
Awesome. Yeah, great. Thanks. Good to hear that. Thanks, Jimmy. And I agree. I think there's similar vision there.
Great. One back for you, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
And this is something I often get asked when I'm engaging with our customers or potential customers: that can BanQu provide support with supplier sort of collaboration programs, and how?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good question. We get that a lot, as you said. I think absolutely. An effective traceability solution, whichever solution it is, can really help you establish a stronger, more transparent relationship with your suppliers. And we do so, and it can do so by creating a collaborative platform where you can share data, verify credentials, and really track performance in real time, which is critical, as you know, and as you are showing on screen. It allows you to automate and consolidate the data all into one platform instead of having it in multiple different systems. So really bringing it into one platform and consolidating it is critical. And then it really does strengthen the trust and ensures that all stakeholders are aligned with your sustainability and your compliance goals, which in turn can lead to obviously maximizing efficiencies and also empowering the key stakeholders within your supply chain and your suppliers. So I think yes, it's a good question, but it's really important. Yeah,
one of the keys, and well put. Thanks, Warren.
Good. Okay, maybe another question from my side. So obviously we've been through a journey together. What products and materials have you mapped on BanQu up until this stage?
So yeah, journey is right. It's been over a year, I think, of the project so far, and we wanted to map our own supply chain, some of it from a regulatory point of view. So we've started with things like cotton and paper, which both have some regulations attached to them, EUDR and UFLPA respectively, and have been quite successful going down the supply chain in that. We started with polyester, recycled polyester, going upstream for some of our recycled polyester care labels, managing to go 4 tiers upstream from ourselves, getting back to the recycling facility in China. And it was very much a learning process. Again, comes back to the poll. We faced resistance and reluctance from our suppliers at first. They didn't understand why we wanted the data, what we were going to do with it, and who we were going to share it with. So we spent quite a bit of time having discussions around why it was important for us, what are the mutual benefits of providing this data, and obviously some assurances that we would treat the data with respect, and that we would treat it with confidentiality where needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, I think again, common queries that are raised. Maybe as a follow-on question to that, what sort of data did you guys collect and how? What sort of data are you collecting and how have you done it?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, Elephant, one bite at a time, iterative process. We started with a high volume product of ours where we had a strong-ish relationship to begin with the supplier. Because it was recycled content, we wanted to specifically map GRS, Global Recycle Standard certificates, through up the supply chain. We gathered those from each of the organizations above our supplier. We also gathered times of transactions, weights, types of yarns, things like that, dates. We did it manually on Excel kind of at first over longer time periods, then working with BanQu to get that onto the system, slowly shortened those down, particularly once our suppliers became more familiar with the formats, how to gather the data, and then slowly got it down to now almost a like quarterly collection process that goes up onto up onto the BanQu system, where we can view things like our reports that gives us insights into dates, even starting to realize that maybe some orders can be consolidated into one shipment. So yeah, a very informative process for us.
Good. Yeah, good. Thanks for the feedback. That's interesting.
One question again, one last question, and this is one that often comes up as well, is there's a perceived fear or intimidation around really going deep into the supply chain. How do you do it? And I wanted to ask you, obviously you guys have done work like this. How far down the supply chain have you guys engaged with before? What sort of other projects have you done in terms of deep supply chain engagement?
It's a really good question. Look, Jimmy, we've been doing it for a while. We've been doing it for 9 years now. And we really started at the first mile. So we work across multiple industries and multiple sectors with multiple use cases. But we really have been able to, not just sort of tier 1, tier 2, we get down to the first mile. So to the farm or to the mine or to the waste collection sites, the buyback centers, et cetera, et cetera. And we really have been able to work with our partners to capture that data from the first mile all the way through to the last mile, and then post-consumer too. And I think it's critical. We work extensively in DPP as obviously, which is what today is about, but also in EUDR, and often that's critical. It's a really good and important starting point, is being at the source or at the origin, which I'll touch on in my presentation a little bit later. But yeah, we've been on the ground from the first mile, really working all the way upstream through the tiers within the supply chain in terms of full supply chain. Yeah.
Oh, awesome work, I must say, Warren. Thanks so much for the insights on that. Cool. I'm gonna leave you. I'm gonna jump back off stage. I'll be back later for some questions, but I'm gonna leave it up to you. Thank you, Warren.
Sure. Thanks, Jimmy. So I'm going to bring up my presentation. Give me 1 second. There we go. So thank you, everybody. It's great to be here. The purpose of my presentation today is just to introduce you to the BanQu platform, and obviously share a little bit more insights into the DPP and the digital product passport, how that works, and how it can really help you with your business going forward. So BanQu, we're a profit for purpose supply chain traceability platform. Our vision at BanQu, we're really aiming to be the market leader in supply chain traceability and due diligence compliance solutions globally. We've built our platform and continue to make enhancements to ensure seamless interoperability, highest security, fastest deployment, and ease of use at every supply chain tier down to the source, as I just touched on in our chat with Jimmy. Linked to that, our mission, which is really, as I said, linked to our sort of purpose. By 2028, BanQu aims to help lift 100 million people out of extreme poverty. We care deeply about creating an equitable economy in which every brand can prove provenance, every consumer can shop ethically, and every supply chain contributor down to the farmer is granted true visibility. And it's something that drives us at BanQu on a daily basis. We've spent the last 9 years building expertise and growing our clients, and our focus continues, and our goal continues to be to help companies drive a more resilient, sustainable business, and ultimately doing good for people, for planet, and for business. This slide is a familiar slide to a lot of businesses. The lack of supply chain visibility is a key area of opportunity. From disjointed data capture and reporting to paper-based, error-prone processes. This is what we find when we talk to a lot of customers and a lot of potential clients out there. And obviously, when you're looking at things like DPP, then it needs to evolve quite quickly. So this slide kind of brings together how we believe DPP and how brands can really work towards achieving their DPP requirements, because it works around full end-to-end visibility. For DPP, it's really important to showcase the full life cycle of the product and everything that takes place in that journey. from where the actual fiber started. So, you know, if you think of cotton as an example, and prove all the way from the farm or the origin through the ginning, the spinning, and the yarn processes right through to the finished product. You know, so this, like if you look at this cotton T-shirt that I'm wearing today as an example, how can you prove where this came from, and obviously the journey that it's been on to get here? It's really critical to maintain chain of custody from start, as you can see in this diagram on screen now, where the product started and where it's going. And obviously, what's really important for DPP is what happens afterwards and where does the product end up. So from our experience, a lot of companies are not able to easily collect this data and have the system to consolidate it and tick and tie it all together. So obviously, if you look at the color on this diagram, that's where you bring it all together and connect and the stakeholders and the systems into one place. So regardless of whether this is just tier 1 or tier 2 that you're looking to address and engage on, all the way back to the farm, we believe that the opportunity remains. Really working together, end-to-end visibility. So DPP, how to meet your objectives. I think this is a common question that we get out there, and ultimately it comes down to 3 principles: enhanced transparency, simplified compliance, and amplified circularity. We've broken at BanQu, we broke it down into 6 categories. The first one, as you'll see, is geolocated proof of provenance, and the precise origin. So understanding the precise origin of raw materials is essential for pinpointing high-risk areas and data backing ethical sourcing practices. This ensures that materials like cotton, as I touched on a little bit earlier, are sourced from verified sustainable locations, and for example, no deforestation, which comes up a lot. The second pillar that we look at is ESG and chain of custody data. So having transparency and transparency at each tier throughout your supply chain. So maintaining a transparent chain of custody tied to the ESG data, of course, at each tier is vital in demonstrating compliance with due diligence standards throughout the product's life cycle. The third pillar that we touch on is real-time configurable reports. So making informed decisions and staying up to date. I think that's critical because real-time data is really important for making informed decisions and maintaining up-to-date product information that can be verified, as an example, by auditors when you need to and if you have to provide that information. The third pillar that we have is, and arguably this is really, really important based on DPP specifically, but is system interoperability. So allowing for the creation, obviously, of reliable machine readable DPPs, things like QR codes, which we have done extensively at BanQu. And on this, for a DPP to be effective and comprehensive, your traceability software must integrate seamlessly with your existing supply chain systems and existing supply chain workflows, ultimately ensuring smooth operations and also consistency in the data that you are collecting and bringing in. The fifth pillar is scalability. So scalable traceability solutions are key for staying agile. And I think it's really important to stay agile in this process to the evolving DPP requirements and business objectives. As we know, these requirements evolve all the time and are constantly changing and updating and evolving. And this really allows for the expansion of traceability efforts across regions and commodities without significant delays. So ideally, an ideal solution should be cloud-based. Obviously, we at BanQu are, and you don't want any additional hardware installation, as an example. So being able to stay agile and nimble and being able to scale effectively is really important. The sixth pillar that we talk about is also really important, and that's data security. So providing immutable, secure, and tamper-proof data is critical because obviously, as we know, protecting sensitive supply chain data is really important for maintaining trust amongst your suppliers, and compliance with data protection regulations like GDPR, as an example, which is obviously really important in the EU, and ultimately to provide suppliers with the confidence that their data is protected. So how do you do that? So that's a summary of how you need to meet your DPP objectives. And again, it all comes down to enhanced transparency, simplified compliance, and amplified circularity. How do we do that at BanQu? So ultimately, BanQu ties due diligence evidence and ESG metrics to your supply chain, achieving next level visibility to your global operations. And we bring 4 types of data together into one platform. The first data type that we utilize and that we bring in is, we call it asset traceability. And this is really your chain of custody. So tracking exactly where your materials originate throughout the chain of custody and mapping out your entire supply chain, end-to-end traceability from source to shelf. So we allow you to track all your supply chain tiers, including the ESG data, by maintaining an unbroken, verifiable record of each transaction, each transformation, and transportation. Your company can easily access supplier details to construct a DPP in line with the specific and set criteria. So that's the first data type. The second data type that we bring in, we call it source level data. Now, this is location-based metrics. As you saw on the previous slide, that's really critical. So capturing the on-the-ground data from the origin of your raw materials to ensure the utmost quality, efficiency, and sustainability across your supply chain. We use, at BanQu, we use blockchain technology to capture and store the geolocated data, which really does link the raw materials to specific coordinates, which is obviously critical. This ensures that materials, again, if we use like cotton as an example, which I used earlier, are sourced from verified sustainable locations. And again, for example, there's no deforestation. So this allows you to provide immutable proof of provenance. And by doing so, we help verify and showcase on their DPP that no harmful or unethical practices were involved in the process. So that's the second type. The third type of data that we bring in is, we call it sustainability metrics. And this is really the social and environmental data that you can capture. So gathering the social and environmental metrics needed to ensure impact and back up or validate your circularity claims. We have extensive built-in templates and forms that we allow you to capture this detail in real time. And an example of this is things which is obviously important from a DPP perspective, are things like greenhouse gas emissions, scope 3 emissions, and also from a social perspective, things like child labor and fair wages, which are obviously critical. The fourth data type that we bring in, and arguably the most important, one would argue, is compliance reporting. So your compliance, your reporting, and your dashboarding. So really having power and streamline your compliance reporting. You know, we're talking about DPP today, but basically any legislation or regulations that you need to comply with to really risk mitigate from risk mitigation to supplier scorecards and beyond. So we have within BanQu highly configurable reports and tools that allow you and brands to generate up-to-date customizable reports that reflect what you need to reflect based on your specific requirements. And this is essential for staying compliant with evolving DPP regulations. As I've touched on earlier, this evolves all the time. And it's really important to be able to stay on top of that. And so you can respond swiftly to the supply chain regulations and maintain transparency with consumers and with investors. This also, it's also really important, again, linked to what we discussed earlier, that you have seamless integration with existing systems that brands have in place or our partners have in place. You know, things like ERP systems, inventory management solutions, and really being able to integrate those systems into one platform and consolidate it accordingly. And we do so through a number of ways and factors. So that's my presentation for today. I hope that I was able to share a little bit of insight with you guys. I think you probably heard enough of me, so maybe it's time for another poll. Let's bring up a poll, and we can then have a look at the answer. So the poll that we're going to do, linked to what we've just discussed, is how do you plan to access tiers beyond tier 1 and tier 2? So I'll give you a couple of maybe say 20 seconds to allow you some time to give an answer here, and then it'll be interesting to see. I certainly found the first poll extremely interesting. So let's give it 10 or 15 seconds, and then we can see where we land on that. Okay, I think that should be good. Can we bring up the results? Okay, so existing certifications like GRS, GOTS, GOTS, HEG, Worldly, FSC, etc. I think that's I'm not surprised by that. I think it's definitely what we see out there, and that's quite a common response that we see out in the market. And it is really important. It's a really important process to go through. Great. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate your time. And I'm going to step back into backstage. But before I do so, I would like to bring up and welcome Bas van der Pol as he takes over and takes you through a very interesting presentation. Welcome, Bas.
Hey, Baron, thank you so much. Very interesting presentation. And yeah, I think I'll see you after mine.
Yeah, well,
I'm going to jump into the last, I'm going to jump into the last 10 minutes, the last part of this webinar. My name is Bas, I'm the founder at Tappr. The goal for today is to explain a little bit how digital product passports work, and also make you excited about the future, because you know, digital product passport is about data, but it's also about something exciting. We're going to bring your products alive. Before we kick off, brief introduction about Tappr. We're founded in 2021. We're a digital product passport platform focused on apparel and sporting brands. And we help brands with compliance, but also with consumer engagement. And we're trying to combine those a little bit. So a small reminder, don't forget to use the Q&A feature if you've got any questions, because we can deal with those at the end. So what exactly is a digital product passport? Well, I think we spoke a lot about it today. And in broad terms, it's a digital record that all stakeholders in the value chain can access and contribute to, right? That's the real definition. And first, and I want to say that that's exactly what it is. That's what it will become. And we're not speaking against that. But at the same time, it's a complex subject, and we like to dumb things down. And realistically speaking, in the next 5 years, a digital product passport is about collecting more data about your supply chain and putting it into a mini site tailored to the product and making it accessible through a QR code. All right. So that's, I mean, in the experts groups of the European Union, that would not be appreciated. But that's the reality in the first 5 years, right? Because they are coming. The digital product passports are coming. Imagine a world where every product, you know, this man is wearing a red sweater, a t-shirt, jeans. Imagine that every product has a digital identity that is able to tell its story, that is able to show transparency, what the product journey was, where you can engage with the products. That is going to be soon the reality for any product, right? Textiles is the first category, but soon other categories like furniture, electronics, every product gets a digital identity. But today we're speaking about textiles because the regulation is coming here first. But it's not the only thing why digital product passports are going to be so important. It's not only regulation. I know 90% of the audience here today is here because of regulation. But there's much more. Think about the advancing circular economy. I mean, thrift shops are doing so well. Vinted, I believe it was last quarter, had their first profitable quarter ever, right? That's the resale platform. Furthermore, the barcode is going away. I mean, the barcode has been around for about 50 years now, but in 2027, GS1, the organization behind the barcode, is planning to retire the barcode and introduce the QR code. And this QR code is GS1 digital link. We'll get to it later. But this is a big thing, right? And QR codes, they are adopted, right? Especially because of COVID, everyone knows how to deal with a QR code. Even your grandparents know how to scan a QR code. Now, something more technical that not everyone might know is that online web apps have gained significant development over the past years, and they are very mature now. And as we said, the digital product passport needs to be accessible to consumers. They cannot be hidden in some kind of app. So we need this technology as well. And finally, yes, there are regulations coming, like Jimmy and Warren discussed. And as I said, compliance is a big thing, right? So we want to speak about, what does compliance mean, right? Compliance is a data game. Whatever point of view you take, it's a data exercise. That's why we're so proud to work with ITL and BanQu, who understand this thoroughly, that you need each other to get this data right and to combine this data. And today I want to onboard you a little bit on this data ontology, but at the same time, I do want to stress that we really simplified it a lot, so it's understandable for everyone. So if you're an expert in this call, you might say like, okay, this is very simplified, but I think this helps in getting a better feeling of how it works. And the way we're going to explain this is we're going to look at a real example of how a digital product passport is related to a data model, to a data ontology. So as you can see right here, this is one of our customers, Studio on a Loose, who generously allowed us to share their story with you. So here you can see a QR code, very visible. And we're going to look at how this data is being built up. Now, for everyone that wants to join and have the live digital product passport on their smartphone, feel free to scan this QR code now, but we're also going to visually show it in the slide. So if you don't have your phone with you, don't worry about it. So first and foremost, something that's increasingly important, I've said it before, GS1 digital link. GS1 is the organization behind the barcode. So this number below the barcode, this is what we call a GTIN, a global trade identification number. And actually every brand works with this. You and your department might not be familiar with this, but every brand works with GS1 and buys these GTINs. And one exciting thing is that on the long term, this barcode is going to disappear. In the long term, this hang tag can be removed, and it's just this QR code that's going over the cashier system at a retailer or that's being used in a warehouse. And this GTIN is important because the GTIN is what describes the product, right? So if we're now going to look at the passport, you'll see that we first show an animation. We want to make it a little bit engaging. But at the same time, you see an image, you see a product title, you see a description, you see things that are very, very common for a brand. Now, this is the part where none of the brands are struggling with in terms of, data collection, right? But then we open the passport, and in the passport, you can show a lot of information, right, about the product. So one of the things you can show that most brands have is the care instruction. So showing the care instruction is a very, very sustainable way of extending the life cycle of the products, right? Instead of these washing symbols, you can now really show proper care instruction with visually appealing icons. Brands have this as well. There's no problem here. But now we get to the more complicated part. And again, we have really dumbed it down. The thing that a brand does well is sourcing products, right? And here, this is where the challenge starts, right? You need to report the product journey, the traceability, the certificates, the footprint. I mean, I think Warren and Jimmy have been explaining this in way more extensive, right? And this is really where the challenge comes in. You don't need to report only on your product. You need to report on the supply chain that product has had, right? And there, the crucial part is your purchase order. So every time you do a production batch, you've got a new set of, you've got different components, different suppliers, different assembler, there's so much sourcing details that changes from one supplier to the from one purchase order to the other, and that's what makes it complicated. This is really where most of the brands struggle, right? But we just want to show you how this looks in real, right? So you can report on the materials, on all your components, on your certificates, right? So this product has a lot of certificates. Some certificates are the global recycled standard for the fabric. You can open this certificate. You can validate it. You can authenticate it. Then you can look at the traceability steps. So in this case, they went to tier 2 up to the fabric formation. It's interactive. Your product is really, you can see the product journey, and that is quite an exciting part. But at the same time, you also have, for instance, footprint, but this product doesn't have a footprint. This was maybe a little bit too fast, and the reason, the message, you might see it on your phone, 80% of their products have a footprint, but not this one. And the reason why we still pick this product is we just want to show you that that every brand has data availability issues, and that's totally fine. It's about getting started and progress, and not about being perfect at this stage, because we have the data, and the data is that none of the brands have all the data. And the sooner you start this process, the better, because it is an iterative process, and you're going to have hiccups along the way. This digital product passport seems like a lot of work and costs, and that's true, right? I mean, in a way, and I think it's good, right? You need to report on your supply chain today. But is there a return to be made with this digital product passport? Well, before the digital product passport, you would, produce a garment, sell the garment, that is your revenue, and then the life cycle is untracked. You're absolutely blind. You have no clue what's happening with your garments or with your items. It's an unmonetized life cycle. But with the digital product passport, you produce your item, and the initial sale is just your first time you're making money out of the product. And you can have so many revenue opportunities throughout the life cycle of the product. You have the resale revenue, you've got service revenue, you've all sorts of ways how you can make revenue out of the product. And when a CFO asks you, like, hey, how are we going to grow our revenues by 20% next year? The answer won't just be selling more. It will be about unlocking new streams, new revenue streams from products you've already sold. And the circular economy, that's a very crucial part where the DPP will support. The most common circular opportunities are resale, repair and care, end-of-life options, then recycling, leasing and rental, and life cycle assessments. Because of the time, we can only zoom into one, and I think the most promising one at this stage is really the resale, right? So resale and vintage is really booming right now. And how does resale benefit from a digital product passport? Well, it makes it super simple for the consumer to resell your product, right? You scan the QR, click on the button, and you start selling your product. And this DPP can deliver directly verified data to the resale platform. So the product listing of your resale platform will become better. The second, consumer can also scan the QR code, learn the washing instructions, right? It helps with counterfeit issues. There's a lot of benefits, and you actually can see this from all the different circularity models. Now, there's a little bit more besides the circular economy, how a digital product passport can deliver value. If every product gets a QR code with a branded experience, then this transforms products into storytellers. It transforms products into a point of sale. It turns every product into a brand ambassador. Ultimately, you can connect with your consumers. And if we look right now at how consumers discover new products, new brands, how people shop today, marketplaces are the most common way consumers are meeting new brands. And I think we all order something from a marketplace from time to time. And you can see that, if you think about the consumer experience, you lose a lot of the brand value there, right? It's about the marketplace, it's maybe about DHL, but how can we restore this magical moment between a brand and consumer? That's what a digital product passport can do. And we've got one customer case that we can, well, we can't share their name, unfortunately. And to be sure, this is not the benchmark because this is an extreme outlier. But what you can see is that they're selling globally, and they're meeting all their consumers, right? So they're seeing, where are my consumers based? They can connect with this consumer, actually, you know, get a return on investment by getting to know this consumer, optimizing their product strategy, optimizing their sales and distribution strategy. So 76% of the products that they sell have at least one scan. That's what we call the scan rate. And then the registration rate is 84%, which means from 3/4 of the products that get scanned, more than 3/4 of the products actually get registered. They get a consumer profile attached to the brand. And then more than half sign up to the newsletter. And I think that's my final conclusion, right? You got to start preparing for the regulation of tomorrow by capitalizing on the innovation today. You got to start early to get your compliance, to make it sure it's not a short race, but more like a marathon where you can iterate and improve over time. And there's actually a return on investment to be made. And that's why, starting early is really the key for success. Thank you so much. I think we're now going to move on to some final Q&A, if there's anything there.
Hi there is. There are some questions, which is really good. Thank you so much. It's a real good interactive conversation. Really enjoyed it, and I'm pretty sure our audience did too. So I've got two questions, because we've run out of time now and everyone is super busy. The first one that's come through is, do we need to put labels inside garments, or can it be on the hang tag? I will put that through to Jimmy first of all, but Baz, it'd be really good to kind of talk about it, how you're sort of seeing it with the brands that you're already sort of working with as well, kind of give a sense of how it is right now and potentially how it could be in the future.
Yeah, so from a regulatory point of view, you will need QR codes inside the garment, on the garment at end of life for DPP, right? So for that use case, in a few years when it becomes regulated, you will need the QR code inside to be there on the garment at its end of life. For now, to unlock the downstream additional revenue opportunities, using a hang tag can give you the benefits that you need now. It's a good place to start. It's a good place to learn how to get your data systems in place, learn what types of printing methods and what you want to display. So both are applicable. I would say that hang tags are probably a good starting point, and to then later start to add it into your garment from the regulatory perspective. Baz, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I agree. I think, summarized, like you said, it's about the circular economy. It's about monetizing the life, or about, getting the life cycle, making sure the DPP is there throughout the life cycle. And, your hang tag is discarded, right? So you need to have it in product. Mm-hmm. Though most regulations today, like the AJAC, for instance, they allow it to be outside of the product. We expect, based out of the AJAC's, the ESPR's vision, that it really has to be in product. So I would prepare for that for sure.
Great, thank you. And I've got a question, actually. I'm going to include Warren here, something for you, potentially. Sure. What has the experience been like collecting data from suppliers in emerging markets where reporting systems are not as mature?
That's a really good question, Haley. I think the answer to that is it's tricky and it's complex and it's often quite difficult, as Jimmy touched on, I think, earlier in his presentation. But I think it's all about relationships. It's all about building trust, as I touched on, I think, a little bit earlier, and really training and working with, as opposed to asking for and demanding. So working with your suppliers, building trust in why you're doing it, what you're doing it for, and then really hand-holding them through the process. The question, I think, is around emerging markets. We do that extensively, and really working with the teams on the ground to make sure that you can capture that data and the required data, and obviously then pointing out the benefits, because there are a number of benefits to that. There could be incentives, could be better commercial offerings, better pricing, et cetera, et cetera. And then obviously the fact that it's also access to data, which is critical.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm actually going to ask one more quick question, maybe to you, Jimmy. Do you also support brands with data beyond just the labels that you provide, such as fabric and other trims? It probably could be open to also Warren as well, but let's start with you, Jimmy.
Yes, we do. BanQu do that. Ultimately, you're going to want to and need to trace all aspects of what's on a garment or the product. You'll need a bill of materials, and they'll all need to be traced. If you trace your garment and everything seems to be fine and compliant, but other parts of it are not made with environmentally sound practices or social and compliance standards not up to scratch, then it's still not a sustainable product. So yeah, everything will need to be included. That is something we can support with. It's something we have been involved in before. So yeah, answer summary is yes. Warren, I don't know if Warren or Baz, anyone wants to add any more?
I can maybe just back that up, Jimmy. I agree with you. I think you certainly can support brands throughout their full requirements. I mean, at BanQu, we work across multiple material types, multiple industries, you know, from agriculture to waste and recycling to fashion, across different fabrics like cotton, you know, in agriculture, across all the different raw materials and commodities. And then, as I touched on a little bit earlier, I think the chain of custody element is also really important. So, you know, a material type is transformed from one tier to the other and becomes something else. So being able to manage and track and trace that chain of custody throughout that upstream supply chain is absolutely critical. And with a traceability solution, you can do so, and it allows you to do so. So yeah, you can track all material types and manage the process of the transformation throughout the process. Yeah.
Brilliant, thanks, Warren. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. It's been such a great, varied conversation. I don't know, Jimmy, if you want to have a quick wrap up, and then we will call it a day for now. But yeah, carry on.
Thanks, Haley. Just the last kind of 2-3 kind of takeaways that we've learned. One, doing this ourselves, working with great partners like Tappr and BanQu, is that the people and the relationships in your supply chain are paramount. Mutual benefits need to be highlighted and be a topic for your engagements with your suppliers. The regulatory education piece is critical for both you and your suppliers. Ultimately, the shift of traceability is aligned with more equitable supply chain relationships, and that can't be understated. And lastly, is that focusing on real transparency, real traceability breeds real accountability, and that breeds growth in your organization. Start small, expand it. And that brings us to a close. Just want to say thanks to Haley for moderating the session, Baz and Warren for attending, and all of your insights. And thanks to all the attendees and the questions. Awesome session. You're welcome to reach out to any of us afterwards with any further questions. But thank you so much for your time today, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Take care. Bye.
Guys. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.